Number 3.
I live on a decent sized farm. We have cows and grow corn and grapes. 2 nights ago, my dad asked me to go investigate the cornfield because he saw the plants moving. It's pitch black, so I decided to go on my gator. It's a smallish tractor. I ride into the cornfield to see that some of the plants have been pulled out of the ground. I don't think much of it because it most likely is a raccoon or some other animal like that eating our crops. As I get closer, I see that there's a trail of corn kernels going to the back shed. I'm not really a paranoid person, so I don't get scared. I pull out my rifle, ready to shoot this animal. But in the shed, there's clothing, food, and a flashlight. I look deeper into the shed and lock eyes with a person. I load my rifle and scream out, "Come out or I'm going to shoot you." All of a sudden, 3 huge men come out from behind the hay right behind me. They're about 6'3" each, and I'm only about 5'2". I point my rifle at one, but all of a sudden I felt the feeling of you don't want to kill them, and I froze. The 3 then grab some stuff and run out, but the last one stops and says,
"You're lucky you didn't shoot, kid."
I then drive up to my house and call the police while telling my parents. When the police come, they do a search on my property, finding 6 men in the fields. They told me if I shot that man, the other men would have likely come out behind me and strangled me or something. I am now never gonna go alone at night on my farm.
Number 2.
This incident occurred about 5 years ago in my home state of CT. To clarify, my hometown only has a max population of around 10,000 during the winter months, since it's a coastal town and is somewhat barren when the summer tourists aren't hitting up the beaches. Because of this, crime in my town virtually never gets more serious than a car accident or a Friday night drunken brawl at a bar, which made what happened on this particular night all that more terrifying. I was 19 at the time and had just gotten home from my MOS school. For those not familiar with the military terminology, it's where military personnel go to learn and receive training in their specific job for the armed forces. I had been gone for over a year, so it was good to be home. I was lying in my bed, watching a movie on my laptop, all alone in my house. My little brother and his best friend had left a few minutes earlier with their bikes because they wanted to take a ride to McDonald's for a late night snack. I didn't think it was a good idea for them to be heading there on their bikes so late. It was about 12:30 at night, but I let them go anyway since the restaurant was actually fairly close and they could make it to the place and back well within the hour. They also weren't old enough to drive, and I didn't feel like taking them, so biking was the only way. They hadn't been gone for more than 15 minutes when I suddenly got a call on my cell phone. I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was my brother calling me. My immediate reaction was to ignore the call, since he had a habit of calling me randomly sometimes to just goof off, and I didn't feel like dealing with his foolishness. So that's exactly what I did, and I returned to my movie. Not a minute later though, he tried calling me again. This time, I picked up. He sounded completely out of breath and was whispering so I could barely hear him. I asked him what he wanted, and I remember his exact response to this day.
"Holland, some guy in a white car just tried to hit me and Matt. We both jumped away, but he ran over my bike and it's completely trashed. Please, come and get us."
I took a second and then laughed. I said,
"Sure bro, whatever you say."
He told me he wasn't joking though. I told him to get his stuff and come home because it was late. I then hung up on him. It sounds cold, but like I said, he had played practical jokes on me before, so I was skeptical of his story. I put my phone back down and prepared to continue watching my movie. However, almost as quickly as I had hung up, my phone rang again from an unknown number. I answered, and this time it was my brother's friend.
"Holland, Dalton isn't joking. He almost ran us over, and Dalton's bike is broken. He keeps driving back and forth looking for us, but we're hiding in a ditch off in the woods. Seriously, come and get us, please."
This immediately made my blood run cold. If my brother was playing a joke, then why would his friend call me and tell me that same story?
"Where are you?"
I asked. He told me the location, and it turns out it was only about a mile down our road.
"Please, come get us. He isn't leaving the area, and we can't move."
I said okay, and he hung up, telling me that he was worried that the guy could hear them talking on the phone. The moment he hung up, I immediately switched into marine mode. I ran to my closet where I keep my gun safe and grabbed my AR-15 and 3 30-round magazines. I also grabbed my K-bar knife, just in case, and strapped it to my belt. Once I was loaded, I got in my car and sped down the road. I reached the spot where I was told my brother and his friend were, but I couldn't find them. I got out of the car and sent my brother a text telling him that I was here and he should come out. A few seconds later, him and his friend come running out, wheeling their bikes with them. When my eyes fell on my brother's bike, I was instantly overcome with a mixture of fear and anger. His bike was completely destroyed. It looked like it had been through a trash compactor. He could barely wheel it out onto the road in the state it was in. It then hit me that whoever this guy was had to have hit that bike with some speed and intention. He knew exactly what he was doing. I told the boys to load their bikes up on my truck, and they did. As I was watching them load their bikes though, my brother pointed down the road and his face turned white.
"Holland,"
he breathed. I turned to look at what he was pointing at and saw a single lone car at the end of the road, right after the road curved out of sight. It was a small, white car of a common build, almost like a Honda Civic or a Toyota Camry, and it was sitting there in the middle of the road with its lights on, as if it were just staring right at us. Training kicked in. I told the boys to get behind the car and stay low. I then grabbed my rifle from the back seat and opened the driver's side door and stood behind it, placing the barrel of my rifle into the crook between the door and the car frame. I did this to help steady my aim and to provide cover in case the guy in the car ended up having a gun of his own. Once I was in position, I steadied my breathing and took aim at the grille of his car. I was following standard operation procedure taught to us before we deployed to Afghanistan. If a vehicle is charging a checkpoint and you suspect it is a car loaded with explosives, you first fire into the grille in order to destroy the engine block or the radiator. If this doesn't stop the vehicle, then you have permission to open fire into the windshield. This was my exact plan. So, I'm taking aim at this guy's car, heart beating 1,000,000 miles an hour because of a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and anger at what he did to my brother. We sat there for what must have been a good 2 minutes, but it feels like hours when you're in a confrontation like that. I don't know if the guy saw my weapon and decided it wasn't worth it, or if he just got bored, but after some time he flashed his high beams at me, honked his horn, and then spun around and drove off, tires screeching and everything. I held my aim a little bit longer, just in case he changed his mind, but he never came back. We ended up calling the police, who took a statement and everything, but nothing ever came of it. The police who responded actually ended up cuffing me since I had weapons on me. I didn't get arrested though, since my story was backed up by my brother and his friend, and Dalton's bike was there for evidence. The whole thing really freaked my brother out, and to this day he refuses to ride a bike, especially since the guy was never caught. I'll never truly know the guy's intentions. Maybe he was just drunk, but if he wasn't, he's a sick bastard, and he's still out there somewhere. Number 1. My son Preston will be 4 years old next month. He saved my life in every way a person can be saved. I went from a depressed, bulimic college dropout mess to a young mother holding her life's purpose in her hands. But this birth also brought some strange events. The dreams started first. I'm sure every first-time mother has had those sleepless nights and weird dreams from lack of sleep, but my dreams seemed to run on a theme. Every time I closed my eyes and drifted off into the fog of sleep, I would see the same thing. I would feel paralyzed and couldn't move, but not really afraid. As I laid motionless in my dreams, black ash would rain down from the ceiling in soft puffs. I was hypnotized and unable to look away. It would feel like days, like time completely halted. The first few weeks of my son's life, I had that reoccurring dream nearly every night. It was pretty simple. Just that black ash falling out from seemingly thin air above me. It wasn't very unpleasant, so I didn't say anything to my fiancée and didn't think much of it. When Preston turned 2 months old, we moved in with a friend to have some extra money. He had a nice place and Preston had his own room still, so I didn't mind moving. The first night in the new place, the dreams changed. The scene shifted from our bedroom to the nursery. Now when I dreamt, I would suddenly be sitting on the floor next to my son's crib as ash fell and covered his room in a black mess. A few times, I just decided to sleep in my son's room on the floor because of my paranoia. Time passed and our son grew. I had that dream at least once a week. Preston was about 6 months old when things changed. Our roommate Terry and I were binge watching one of Gordon Ramsay's television shows. Preston had been sick the past couple of days, so he was sleeping a good amount, and I took that time to relax and do nothing really. It was a much needed little mummy break. I hated that Preston was sick, but I did like being able to sit down and be lazy for the first time since his birth. We took a break so that Terry could get ready for work. He hurried up the stairs as he shouted about being late and laughed. I turned the PlayStation 3 and television off and then took Preston upstairs and put him in his crib. As I heard Terry getting into the shower, I decided to go back downstairs and grab my Diet Coke I had left on the side table. As I reached the midway step down the stairs, I stopped and stared ahead of me with wide eyes. The television was on, and some sort of hardcore porn was playing on the television. I made a loud, disgusted noise and dashed up the stairs, banging on Terry's bathroom door.
What the hell, man? Watch porn on your own TV and not in the living room.
He opened the door with his robe around him and looked genuinely confused.
What are you talking about?
I explained to him what I saw on TV, and he shook his head, thinking I was joking. He laughed and we both went back downstairs, only to see a blank screen and everything turned off. Then I stopped and thought about it. Terry had gone upstairs before Preston and I. The whole exchange of the three of us going up the stairs was only a few minutes. I started feeling unnerved. Maybe it was one of my fiance's friends. They could have come in and played a prank, but that didn't make sense either. Why come into the apartment in the middle of the day just to watch hardcore porn for a few seconds, then hide or dash out the door when I came down the stairs? Terry and I tried to figure out what had happened. We turned the PS3 back on and checked to see if the internet had any recent searches. Nothing. And nothing new had been watched on Netflix either. There was nothing in the disk drive. We were stumped. Eventually, we just gave up. About a week later, I was home with Preston before work one morning when Terry came down the stairs looking as white as a ghost. He told me about a dream. The words that he said sent a chill through me that I hadn't felt until that very moment.
I was laying in a bed and there was this black soot shit falling from the ceiling,
he began. Already, my eyes filled with tears of sudden fear as he continued.
I couldn't move. It was just layering over my body, over the whole damn room. It was bizarre. Finally, after what seemed like hours, I could move my eyes. There was this thing standing halfway in my closet. I couldn't even make out a shape because it was so blurry.
He'd been standing up, rubbing his arms in frustration, and spoke again, finally able to look me in the eye.
It tried talking to me, but all I heard was loud radio static.
That was the first time I felt afraid to go to sleep. But to my surprise, the dream stopped. I tried to forget it too, to put it out of my mind. A few more strange things happened before we moved out of that apartment. Noises, things moving around in the bathroom at night, but nothing really terrifying. We moved to a different apartment a few months after that incident. We had enough money saved, and Terry decided to go back to Michigan to live with his family. Things were normal for a long time. My fiancé and I got married too. We had another baby, another boy when Preston was about 2 years old. Like clockwork though, that damn dream came back. The night we brought little Kevin home from the hospital, the dream returned. Only much, much worse. It started the same, the black ash, feeling paralysed, how time slowed. But as it went on, I felt this ugly feeling inside of me. I felt angry and horror at the same time. I knew I was asleep and was trying to force myself to wake up. I felt tingles at the ends of all my toes. My eyes finally obeyed me to turn down and look, and this thing was there. I say thing because it had no shape really. It was moving incredibly fast and hovering around my feet. I knew it was looking at me, even though it had no eyes or face. Like a black, blinking mass of ash and rolling cloud is the best way I can describe it. I told my husband everything. He dismissed it for the most part though. I tried my best to convince him it was serious, but he and I were having problems then. Actually, our marriage didn't last much longer after that dream. Then it was just me and the boys in that apartment for the most part, and things got way worse. Looking back on it now, I think my husband kept that thing at bay. Regardless of my emotional turmoil, I was determined to keep the apartment and have a nice place for the boys and I to live. I started back up my artwork, doing commissions and comic art when I could. We got child support and we got by. My ex and I were in good terms, so things weren't too terrible. Kevin was a few months old by then. I was still having the dream though, but the day my husband picked up the last of his belongings from the apartment is when things took a turn for the worst. I was playing with Preston in my living room. We were pushing his little toy cars around on his playmat. I was playing along, making them beep and conducting traffic. He suddenly stopped and set his cars down and held perfectly still. I looked up from playing to ask him what the matter was. Then I saw it. A man. He was directly behind my little boy. A man sitting there staring at me with impossibly wide eyes and a wide open mouth. It was a man I didn't recognize, and he just sat there looking as horrified as I'm sure I looked too. I screamed louder than I ever had in my life as I yanked my son against me and fumbled to get up and run down the hall to grab my other sleeping infant. Preston was crying now. He was afraid because I was afraid. He hadn't seen the man. It was pure instinct to make sure my children were safe with me, even before I fumbled in my jeans for my iPhone. I held them to my chest as I locked the bedroom door and called the apartment security. I was convinced a crazy homeless man had broken into my apartment. An officer was there within 2 minutes, opening the front door and looking around. There was no man anywhere in the apartment. There was no sign of forced entry anywhere, and we lived in a safe area. He assured me nothing was wrong. I also convinced myself everything was fine, and I was just overtired, seeing things. I hadn't been sleeping much at all between being a full-time stay-at-home mum and doing the commissions work while the boys slept. I apologised a million times to the officer, and he was very kind and hugged me, saying everything was alright and to call if I ever needed him again. I tried putting everything out of my mind. I started reaching out to family and friends, telling them that I needed extra help. I didn't like being alone with the boys. I wanted to feel more safe, but nothing really took away that feeling of dread, like I was walking on pins and needles, like I was tiptoeing around a ghost or something. I was making dinner one night while Preston played in the hallway and little Kevin laid on his baby mat kicking and cooing. Preston suddenly ran down the hallway and leaned over the baby gate and exclaimed, "Hi, Daddy," down the stairs at the front door. I looked at him, puzzled. Their father wasn't supposed to come over that day, nor did he have a key. I put down my spatula, walked over to the gate, and looking down, there was no one there. I patted Preston's head and laughed, saying something like, "Daddy's not here, silly boy." Preston got frustrated and insisted his dad was there. As I finished cooking, he stayed at the gate talking to the door as if his dad was down there. I finally got him to sit at the table as we ate. It wasn't until after dinner that I realised the chill in the apartment. I turned the heat up a bit, but it wasn't doing much to help. A few hours later, I heard a voice from the bottom of the stairs. My neighbour's voice. "Hey Madison, your front door's open," my neighbour called. I sat there confused for a second before I got up and walked down the stairs to thank her for telling me. That's why the apartment had been so chilly. I was concerned because I knew I had locked it. Later, that same night, I was putting Preston to sleep. We said our usual good nights. He always says, "Hug and a kiss, mummy," and he crawled into bed. His brother had fallen asleep at the usual time of 7 p.m. It was now around 8:30, and Preston was laying in bed, mumbling to himself as he played with my hair. I was half asleep when he whispered, "Good night, friend," into the darkness. I got the chills and quietly shushed him. A few seconds later, he whispered it again. "Good night, friend." And I did the same, quietly shushing him and soothing his hair back. He then took a deep sigh as if he was beginning to get frustrated. He looked straight ahead into the darkness of his closet and forcefully whispered, "Good night, friend," as if to shush some unseen playmate. I tried my best to stay calm, but I felt instantly sick to my stomach. Preston fell asleep a few moments later, but I was too afraid to move or leave the boys alone in that room. I sat sitting straight up next to Preston's toddler bed for the rest of the night. After that night, I always had a friend stay the night. I started asking around about paranormal stuff, and up until then, it hadn't been talking to the kids, and I figured I could deal with it. I also convinced myself that most of it was just in my head, but after it talked to Preston, I wasn't taking any chances. The last incident in this apartment will haunt me for the rest of my life. I had a friend spend the night like usual. She slept on the sofa in the living room. I felt better with her there, so I was actually getting a decent night's sleep. I was asleep a solid 5 hours before I had a sickening, terrible nightmare. I heard my children crying, and I jumped up to run into their room. I couldn't get the door open for minutes. Their cries turned into blood-curdling screams. I sobbed and banged and shoved and kicked the door. Finally, I broke in, only to see my sons being thrown violently around the room by some invisible force. I was helpless to stop it. I tried to grab them, but whatever it was would yank them away and throw them against a wall. I woke up sobbing. I sat up in my bed, shaking violently. I tried to calm myself down. I finally slid out of bed and pressed my ear to their door. I heard Preston snoring happily in his sleep. I wiped my face again and went into the kitchen to get something to drink. As I took a few drinks, my friend woke up from sleep and sat up on the sofa. She asked me what was wrong. I told her I had a nightmare and finished the glass of water. She smartly changed the subject and started talking about a popular anime we both enjoyed. After a few minutes, my panic faded and we were both laughing quietly. She was in mid-sentence when she glanced behind me with an eyebrow raised.
Preston?
She murmured softly. I turned around expecting to see my son, but I didn't. What I saw was the boy's bedroom door open only a few inches.
Preston?
I asked as well, assuming my little boy was behind the cracked open door. My friend and I just stood there for a moment. I felt chills fly up my spine. Suddenly, terrified it was that thing and it was going to hurt my children. The dream could have been a warning. The door started opening further, creaking quietly. My friend sat back, looking scared. There was no one standing there when the door was open a little more than halfway.
Preston,
I said firmly and louder. Then, I was striding down the hallway. I pushed the door open all the way. The light in the hallway bathed my sleeping son in the light. My eyes darted around the room. Kevin was sound asleep in his crib. I turned to look back down the hallway at my friend. She was watching in horror. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I felt hot breath on the back of my ear. A deep, disembodied voice of a man murmured in a sick mockery.
A hug and a kiss, Mummy.
I spun around, not to look, but to grab both of my children. I ran out of that apartment without another thought, grabbing only their diaper bag and my car keys. My friend followed close behind. We spent the next few nights at my friend's place. That night, we found the number of a local psychic who came out the next morning to meet the boys and I and walk the apartment. He left a few little blessed bags in all the vents of the apartment. He said that the ventilation system would pass the protection from the bags all throughout the building. He didn't charge me a dime. All he could really tell me was that this thing would fade with time. And to my surprise, he was right. Nothing else happened after this visit. I'm not sure why those things happened. All I know is that things started up right after I had both my children and ended as they got older. I have never had a paranormal experience before or after the births of my children. No voices, no visions, no imaginary friends, and no dreams of falling ash. I've come to terms that I'll probably never really understand why it all happened or what exactly it was. I don't plan on having any more kids. Those two perfect boys are all I need. I don't want any of us to go through that again. Recently, the boys and I moved into a farmhouse. I had it blessed and cleansed before we moved in, just in case. G'day mates, it's B-Buster here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video guys. And how about that last one? Jeez. I don't know if you guys noticed, but the last two stories also were narrated on my new mic. Some of the stories that will be coming out have been recorded on my old mic, but the new mic is here now, so majority of the stories should have the quality of those last two stories, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to the Hive members that bravely shared their stories for us all here. And for the chance to have your story feature in a video, you can send your story to my email, which is in the description below. And as always, keep them coming guys, as this channel relies upon your stories to continue. Also, please do me a favour and just state in your email what your story is about in the description, and also provide me with just a short written statement of consent just so that I can be above board with everything. and change names if you don't want any particular names to be shared. So I'm currently working on my Halloween special and it's proving to be a bit of work, so I should have it done on time, but if you don't see a video for a day or so, just know that I'm working on that task at the moment. So yeah, not to worry. It would be awesome if you could like, share, comment and subscribe if you're new. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for updates throughout the week and for hints on the up and coming Halloween special video. Thanks again for tuning in, I love you guys, and as always, I'll see you mates in the next one.